So thank you all for joining. I will give a short outline of tonight that you know we have 2.5 hours together, which is a great amount of time. And you will see the time will pass as fast as you entered now. So tonight we start with an attunement, a meditation to just settle in with the theme we just programmed for this Wisdom Keepers gathering. Um, and of course, we're gonna look ahead to the upcoming hour to hour and a half with Chris and Duane. So, what are their backgrounds and why they're here? And you're gonna see they're coming from two different angles, two different perspectives, two different um, paradigms, I would say. And this is a beautiful dance we're gonna encounter. What are the possibilities, especially creating a new mindset as humans, a mindset of the whole universe, because it's not about the technological evolution of the world leaders who are going to create a diminishing of greenhouse gases. You're going to drive your electric car. You're going to put more trees in the ground. You are more kind to your neighbors, where that's the start, where the mindset starts. And after an hour and a half, a dance with Chris and Duane sounds like music in my ears. We have the last 45 minutes, half an hour, to look ahead for creating more circles as a community, as a human family, to create and to practice this new mindset. So we're gonna guide you through this step by step. And please sit in your comfortable chair. Have a good evening. And before we start, I would like you to close your eyes. Trust us as hosts. We're good people. We came with a good mission. And I ask you the question, so why are you here tonight? What's your real intention of your presence during this gathering with Duane, Chris, and all this human family? Are you here out of curiosity? Are you here to learn? Are you here to thrive? Whatever your intention is, doesn't matter. Or really sense the reason why you're here that's already here in this moment. Visualize your intention for this evening as if it's the present time. What's your contribution to this beautiful world we're living in? What do you sense from your core, from your heart, why you're here to contribute as a whole human family? And if you have a deeper understanding why you contributed tonight, then try to remember this for the rest of the evening. And please feel guided from a meditation we're going to start now. And before we start this meditation, take some deep breaths. Just to settle in. Allow yourself to open up to this visualization. I'm going to guide it now for you. Sense that you are floating in a galaxy and you have a clear and bright view on Mother Earth. It feels at home, floating in this universe and seeing our common ground, Mother Earth. You feel at peace and deeply connected to this beautiful planet in a sky full of stars. You can deeply feel you made this journey before. And now you feel so grateful to see planet Earth from this perspective again. Excitement, ecstasy, and tears of joy are felt over in this present moment. You feel a pull of Mother Earth pulling you towards her body. And you can sharply feel and see all the continents and the oceans of Mother Earth coming into your view. Pulled more closely, you have a clear view on your own continent. You see your country where you live. You see more sharply your province. And you zoomed in to your own city. You can feel your neighborhood you know so well. Instantly you see your house. And the interiors of your house, the inside, the furniture. And you see your loved ones sitting in your beautiful house. And then you sense you're back in your body. You can feel your skin. You can feel your organs and your bones. You are aware of your breath. You are aware of the heartbeat of your beautiful heart. You feel instantly at home. The same feeling when you watched Mother Earth from above. What a journey. A journey from beyond.
Nothing lasts forever. No one lives forever. The flower that fades and dies. Winter passes and spring comes. Embrace the cycle of life that is the greatest love. Go beyond fear. Go beyond fear. Beyond fear takes you into the place where love grows. When you refuse to follow the impulses of fear, anger, and revenge. Beyond means to feel yourself. Start every day singing like the birds. Singing takes you beyond, 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 beyond. We need a repeated discipline, a genuine training to let go our old habits of mind and to find and sustain a new way of seeing. Go beyond the rights and the wrongs. Prayer clears the head and brings back peace to the soul. Go beyond to feel the oneness of the unity. Sing. Singing takes you beyond, 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 beyond. We are all the same, all the same. Looking to find our way back to the source, to the one, to the only one. Go beyond revenge. The greatest moment in our lives is when we allow us to teach each other. Go beyond to feel the oneness of the unity. Singing. Singing takes you beyond, 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 beyond. Take the journey. Take the journey inside of you. To become quiet, to hear the beyond, to become patient, to receive the beyond, to become open, to invite the beyond, and be grateful. Be grateful to allow the beyond. Be in the present moment to live in the beyond. Start every day singing like the birds. Singing takes you beyond, beyond, beyond. What does love have to do with it? Love grows when you trust. When you trust, love heals and renews. Love inspires and empowers us to do great things and makes us a better person to love. Love makes us feel safe and brings us closer to God. When you go beyond is where you find true love. Keep singing. Singing takes you beyond, 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 beyond.
Make connection to your breath again. Deepen your breath. And take your own time to open up your eyes. And going external to all people who joined this gathering. Feel free to make some contact with the people. Look at the thumbnails, the faces. And before we're gonna introduce Chris and Duane, I want to thank you for all the donations. There are a beautiful amount of the donations done as a gift for the Choosing Life project. We're going to hear more about it from Duane, I think. So thank you for that. And I also want to take a moment to introduce Mayo, my co-host during the Wisdomkeepers every month. And I want to say that also Melanie is one of the hosts, but she can't contribute tonight because she has a course running. So Mayo, before we go to Duane and Chris, and we're going to open up, please feel free to share something from your side. Your microphone is still off. On.
Everyone, thank you so much for taking the time for being here with us. Can you hear me now? Fantastic. It is so important to have these conversations within ourselves, but imagine the power of sharing our ideas and connecting from a human stance. And these conversations, although they're mediated through this platform, right? A technology that is provided us the sense of community, even though we may be continents away, or as Boss's beautiful depiction of our neighborhood and our house and wherever we may be, this, what we are doing and what we just did through that guided meditation is truly beyond. It is combining our energies into one essence, into this consciousness. So it is so important to have this meeting, to have more conversations in your neighborhoods with those around you, so that you can share your reality and how we can co-create that reality together. So thank you so much for being here. We look forward to growing with you, to having perhaps a meeting that is face-to-face one day, a Wisdomkeepers face-to-face. But for now, let's sit tight and enjoy the ride. Tonight's conversations are going to be very much expanding our universe into what we can do as human beings here, now, and today, so that we can come together as one species in order for us to thrive as a whole. So thank you so much for being here, taking the time.
Thank you, Mayo. Yes, before we're going to start with Chris and Duane, and we're going to introduce them, of course, and I'm going to also highlight why we're here together, also with Chris and Duane. I invite you, if you have the feeling you want to write something down, something like a question, something like something coming up, an emotion, or something you feel in your system, you want to write it down, feel comfortable to do so. It's handy at the second part of the Wisdomkeepers gathering that we have a Q&A and a sharing part where these things can be shared, and feel open to do so, and feel that this environment is reliable and you can trust this environment. So we're here with a good heart. That's what I want to say. We were going to see if we're going to use a whiteboard to share all our information, or to have more like an integration of the things coming up. And we're just going to feel organically if this is going to happen. So if I'm going to show up a whiteboard, I'm going to explain how we're going to use the whiteboard, but we're going to see. Okay. Before this idea of asking initially Chris and afterwards Duane came up as well in my mind, in our minds, and it's a beautiful coincidence. They're both at this gathering, and would like to introduce them both from the heart. And from a perspective, but I want to say something personal, because since I started, I'm a background medical doctor, an ENT doctor, trained an ENT doctor, and then I'm more like opening up, which is, I think, more like a calling into life, more in integrative medicine, and now I'm into the Grover Legacy training for transpersonal psychology and psychedelic therapy. And that's where I met Chris. Chris, I was at your beautiful course from the Shift Network, LSD in the Mind of Universe, and it opened something up about how we're going to take care of this planet and of this universe, because it's all integrated and it's all it's a one life system or one whole world system. So thank you for that. That's what I want to share personally. And um, until now, and after my own psychedelic experiences, it's getting deeper and deeper, and it feels like we're creating a tribe where these important things can be shared, but it's creating a mind shift by itself. So thank you for that. And maybe it's beautiful to start with you, Chris, because the initial outreach was via email to you, and then Duane came in. Chris, you're a professor emeritus in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Study, and you're specialized in Buddhistic studies of the Youngstown State University. But you're also related to the California Institute of Integral Studies, and also in the advisory council of my training, the Grove Legacy training. And then you're also related to the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So you're not retired or emeritus professor at all. You're full alive and contributing to the mind shift which is happening. You're an author of several books. The latest, it's on my desk every day, and I would really recommend, if you're not in LSD or you're not in psychedelics, you have to read it, because it's very much important information which is in the book. You wrote several books. I'm not going to highlight them all, but LSD in the Mind of the Universe, your latest book, and for me it was transformative. So thank you for that. And in this book, you described your empirical research. You did it on your own with your former wife, with 76 deep, high-dose LSD sessions in which you entered the non-ordinary states of consciousness, and you encountered a vision of our impending global crisis, and also the birth of the future human. So these visions are of importance because this comes from a field which we are not so much aware of. This is beautiful information. So thank you for being here, and thank you for contributing to this gathering.
It's a pleasure to be here, boss.
And then Duane, during the course of Chris, LSD in the Mind of the Universe, you already mentioned, Chris, Duane's work. And after the course, I went through it. And your last book, Duane, Choosing Earth, was mind-blowing for me. It's so full of information. And you're an author of several books which are all important for us humans, but Choosing Earth, and you can find in the chat box already the link to Choosing Earth website and also the book, and you can just download it by PDF. So thank you for that, and thank you for opening up, Duane. In the early 70s, you worked as a senior staff of the member of the Presidential Congressional Commission on the American future of the last 30 years of the last century, so the 70s until 2000s. An important position, and you were also acknowledged for this deep work as a social visionary, exploring the deeper trends that are transforming our world. And you were recognized for this for an international award, a Peace Award, in recognition of this global vision and consciousness of lifestyle that contributes to a more sustainable and spiritual culture. So it's an honor having you here. I would like to open up the field for you both to start with our main question of the evening. How can we create, as humans, a new mindset which transforms our global crisis? Or can we transform the global crisis, or do we have to go through it with a new mindset? So can we start from there, and then we'll see how the dance will evolve. Thank you for being here, you both.
It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. Boss, thank you for the invitation. You hear my voice is a little rough. I've just come down with the cold. I would have canceled, except this material is just too important to let go of the opportunity to talk about it. And I wouldn't pass up an opportunity to talk with Duane. Oh, I'd have to be near dead to pass up this opportunity. We've been friends for over 20 years, 25 years now. And it was first our research and our writing which brought us together. But then as we got to know each other personally and understood the human being behind the research, the friendship has just deepened into a deep, lifelong brotherhood. Now, how Duane and I have thought about today is basically, first of all, I want to say a talk is just an opportunity to get to the Q&A, because the Q&A is where the juice really is. And I'm really looking forward to that part of our discussion. And I know Duane is too. But in terms of the talk, we see this as basically a conversation, an opportunity for Duane and I just to sink into conversation and have the kind of conversation that we have sometimes when we get together. And so I thought we might begin by just kind of affirming some common ground that Duane and I share. First, I'm a philosopher of religion. I've been an academic all my life in Northeast Ohio. Duane is a social activist, a visionary social activist. We've both written books. We've both been completely committed to Our Lives Project. And we both share, coming at it through overlapping means, we both share, I think, a common vision of the universe that can be reached intellectually and can be reached experientially. And that is a vision of the universe that is saturated with intelligence, orders and orders and orders of intelligence. And also the intelligence behind the manifest universe, the intelligence out of which the universe sprang in the Big Bang and continues to unfold and be nourished by this fertile ground of existence. This is common ground for Duane and I. Also common ground is the sense that our nature, our consciousness, if you just sit quietly or if you amplify consciousness, if you sink into consciousness, you sink into your personal unconsciousness, and then you sink into what Jung called the collective unconscious. And if you just keep going, you sink eventually into levels of consciousness so deep, they go beyond the species, they go beyond time and space, and one can enter into deep communion with, I think, what both of us think of as the mind of the universe, both the manifest universe and the universe behind the manifest universe. And Duane and I both share the conviction that this intelligence is profoundly wise. He asked me before we got started, how would you describe the IQ of the universe? Boy, that stumped me for a bit. And I had to think in terms of an IQ on the order of millions and billions, because, I mean, look, this is the intelligence which has manifested everything we see around us, as far as we can see and as deep as we can see. How could we possibly measure the depth of that intelligence? And compassion. And that's a kind of gets to the tricky part, because it's easy enough to see the intelligence when we just look at DNA and we look at the structure of stars and galaxies. We can see layers and layers of intelligence manifesting. But compassion, on the surface, life is hard. Life is, and one could easily conclude, and I understand, you could conclude that life is basically generated by a mean son of a bitch. I mean, it hurts us so much. It just hurts us so terribly. And in order to see the wisdom of the universe and to see the compassion behind the hard conditions in which we live, you have to look very deep. You have to look much deeper than sensory consciousness. You have to much deeper than the workings of the personal and collective psyche. You really must look very, very deeply. I think it was Ramakrishna when he was asked, when he said once, in order to see God, you must be willing to look evil in the face. And in order to see the wisdom of the universe, you must be willing to sit deeply with the pain of existence. And there's nothing Duane or I will say today that would dilute, set aside, sublimate, or in any way sidestep the deep suffering that it takes to live fully an embodied spiritual existence, right? So this is just a warm-up exercise. And what I want to do is toss it to Duane, and we're going to toss it back and forth. And then we're going to move towards this topic of the times that we're living in, the crisis that we are coming into, the depth of that crisis, and what we might do to move through this crisis with courage and to actually accelerate our way through it so we can get through it with intelligence and with compassion, and exploring what the universe wants of humanity at this hour, what the universe is inviting humanity to become, because both of us share the vision that we are coming to a triggering point. We're coming to a bifurcation point where humanity either makes the next step in its long evolutionary journey, or we probably go extinct because we can't survive on this planet in these conditions, staying at the level of consciousness that has brought us here. We either grow up, as Duane says, or we die. And that means this extinction or potential extinction is an enormous evolutionary accelerator. So with that, let me hand it over to my brother, Duane.
Thank you, Brother Chris. Chris is one of my dearest brothers and friends. And I am so grateful for the lifelong the journey that we have shared with our mutual interest, depth, looking at the nature of the universe and where that is leading us as we move into this dangerous and transformative time for humanity, and creative time, and the passions that are present are really compassions. The presence of suffering in the world is a catalyst for our pushing back on ourselves and awakening freshly to where we are and where we might be going from here. So I appreciated Bache saying that he was a doctor by training. And early on in my life, I was going to become a doctor. But I encountered the violence of the Vietnam era. And I shifted over a period of time from physical healing to now social healing. And that's one theme I would really like to explore. And underneath the social healing is our connection with the aliveness of a living universe. And that is where Chris and I have found common ground and common passion in our mutual explorations of that possibility, that reality. So let's begin, Chris.
Right. Where do you want to start? Dig in.
Well, I think it's important just to acknowledge where we are right now, that the crisis of transition isn't something that's in the future, it is happening right now. The head of the United Nations recently said, humanity is on a climate highway to hell. We're on a climate highway to hell. And that's just looking at the climate crisis. We're also on an extraordinary path of extincting a huge proportion of the plant and animal species on this earth. It's estimated by the end of this century, 1 million species, different species, 1 million species will be extinct. We're impoverishing the earth right now. It's extraordinary. We're also in a time of overshoot. We're way overshooting the resource base of the earth. We can't continue as we have. It's estimated that the earth will carry roughly 2 billion people. into the far future. And right now we have 8 billion people. So if we take that to heart, it means that we're roughly 6 billion people over the carrying capacity of the Earth. And so we are in for a rough ride, a rough initiation, if you will, moving from our current condition of overshoot and collapse, the extinction of species, the climate catastrophe, resource depletion, and all the rest, and come to some new healing and some new healthy relationship with the Earth and our ability to live into the far future. So that's yeah.
Let me ask you a question that I know is on people's mind, and I know your answer to it, I suspect. But the question is this: can we avoid this crisis now? If we really get off our butt and mobilize, can we stop what's happening and bring this under control? What do you think?
No, it's too late. Had we started a half century ago, when I began my research on all of this in the early 1970s, there was an opportunity at that time to pull back, take a look at where we were headed, and choose a new pathway. But we have used up that half century to just consume ourselves into a corner, if you will. And so now we're up against it. And we do have the forces, the factors that I was just mentioning: overshoot of the Earth's resource base, a climate catastrophe that's growing, species being extincted at an extraordinary rate, and so on and so on. Now is the time for decision. Now is the time for choice. And so this is where we're looking at this, not as theoretically in the far future, but as right now. We're up against it. And now is the time for a new understanding of who we are. Where are we? Who are we? Where are we going from here? Those are the core themes we need to begin digging into now, not only philosophically, but practically, realistically as a species. So let's begin that inquiry.
Yeah, so the depth of the destabilization that's coming at us has already started. We see a deep unraveling in many areas of the social fabric. We see our political discourse becoming increasingly polarized. Yeah. We're moving in the direction of fascism on one side, totalitarianism on other sides, repression of discourse, denial of facts, of science. It's getting harder and harder to assume any kind of common ground, which are all symptoms, I think, of the fact that the ground is shifting out from underneath our feet. It's like we're in a slow-moving earthquake that's building up year by year, and it's just shaking our systems to its foundations. And if you just look at the research, as Duane has done and many of you have done, if you look at the research, you can just see that the foundations of our culture are shaking, beginning to shake more and more. And we're going to live through this, our generation, my children's generation, your children's generation, your grandchildren's generation. It will still be deepening during these decades ahead. It's hard to envision just how bad it's going to get. When I think about this, my heart explodes with pain. Everyone I sit with who really looks hard at the data, their heart explodes in pain, and they would do anything to not have to go through this. But this is what we're going into. And that means I think it's particularly important that we understand what is happening. Because if we don't understand this at a deep structural level, if we don't understand the evolutionary challenge that we're facing, we're going to give way to despair. We're going to give way to theodicies, which are really deeply demonic and problematic. We're going to give way to political destructive philosophies. So we have to understand this deeply. I'll pass it to you, brother.
Yes. Okay. Here's what I have encountered over the last roughly 40 years, speaking to people around the earth. And often before I give a talk, I will ask an audience one simple question. And the question is this: if you look at the entire human family, and you look at our behaviors, what is the life stage of the human family being expressed by those behaviors? And I give an audience 4 possibilities. 1, that we're behaving like toddlers. 2, that we're behaving like teenagers, like adolescents. 3, that we're behaving like early adults. And 4, like elders. 4 possibilities: toddlers, teenagers, adults, or elders. And I've asked this, and I've been very surprised that around the earth, it doesn't matter who I speak with. It might be a church group, it might be a college audience, it might be a business community, and so on. It doesn't matter. One response comes back again and again and again. Roughly 3/4 of every audience I've spoken to over decades has one response, and they say, we're behaving like adolescents and like teenagers. There's no hesitation regarding that answer. And so if we are in our adolescent stage as a species, what will it take us to move then into our early adulthood? And in many ways, that's what we're looking at right now, the fire of initiation that will push us into a new sense of ourselves, a new sense of the universe in which we live, and a new sense, importantly, of the evolutionary journey in which we're involved. So that is one key framing for me. It's that we're in a rite of passage. It's a time of initiation of our species, and all the suffering, all the pain that we're experiencing right now as a part of that pain that every adolescent as an individual goes through in different ways, but nonetheless, we don't move into our early adulthood without going through the fire of initiation. And so, okay, let's accept that that is how evolution works. We are pushed outside of the nest of our comfort zone and into this transforming future. And it's an extraordinary future that lies before us. And without a sense of where we might be going, we're going to be reluctant to go there. So one thing that I appreciate about Chris and his look at his exploration of the birth of the future human and my own work, that's what we're looking at. What is the maturation of the species about? Where does that take us in terms of our relationship with the universe, our relationship with other humans, our relationship deeply within ourselves? So that's a conversation that Chris and I have had again and again over the years. So Chris, your turn.
Well, to give a deeper context to Duane's observations, I want to point to his second book, Awakening Earth, where he describes the stages of human evolution in terms of the conscious capacities or the levels of consciousness that human beings have evolved over our long evolutionary story. And I think if I have this right, Duane, you correct me, you say in the book, and by the way, if you get the book, read the book, start at the epilogue. Read the epilogue first and then read the book, because the epilogue gives you the experiential insight into where the book came from. But late in the book, he says, we could go through these last 3 evolutionary stages in as little as 500 years. And given that we're talking about tens and hundreds of thousands of years leading up to that point, we're talking about that would represent an enormous acceleration, an exponential acceleration that we're entering into. So very intense, but exponentially sped up. Yes, Duane?
Indeed. We're moving into a time, obviously, of intense compression. This is going to be a heated journey, a heated compression of humanity in the fire of initiation that we're already beginning to experience right now. As we look beyond our nation-state boundaries to the Earth as a whole system, and we're seeing this will not hold, this will not carry us even to the end of this century. So we are in compression times, and we are going to be pushed outside of our usual circumstances and into new conditions as a species, not simply as nations, but as a species as a whole. And that's already beginning to happen right now. And so that will be the catalyst, I think, for rapid acceleration of the evolutionary potentials that are already surfacing. And this gathering is one expression of that. The role of psychedelics, for example, in being a catalyst for awakening us to a new domain of understanding of ourselves and the human journey. So here we go as a species into the fire and into the initiation and hopefully into our higher humanity.
Yeah. And in that context, I want to put on the table one fundamental axiom of my thought. I know Duane shares this axiom, and I suspect probably everyone in this group does too. And that's the concept of reincarnation. And so this was my first book on which I chose to write on reincarnation, starting with the empirical evidence, which I believe is just overwhelming. And I came to this conclusion as a philosopher of religion. So when I look at the world and I see human beings, I don't see them the way that most people see them. I don't see old people as old people and young people as young people. I tend to see souls. And there are old souls in small young bodies, and there are young souls in old withered bodies. But the important key here is understanding that evolution, that reincarnation is a higher order of evolution. It's one of the fundamental truths of a self-manifesting, self-evolving universe. And so far, we've been telling the story of reincarnation saturated by the perspective of theologies and philosophies which have been individually oriented. So we tell the story of reincarnation in terms of individual evolution, the soul's evolution over countless lifetimes, the soul's awakening eventually into individual enlightenment. But it's basically been strapped to a metaphysics which focuses on individual human beings. And it's not that that's false. I think that's really true. But we're missing something deeply if we stop there. When we understand that not just we and everyone we see around us is evolving, but every human being on the planet is a reincarnating essence, then we begin to understand that reincarnation is a collective driver. It is not just an individual driver. It's not just about personal salvation or personal transformation. It is an evolutionary driver of the highest magnitude. And I'll shift just for a second and say, if you ever read my book, Diamonds from Heaven, or as the publisher named it, LSD in the Mind of the Universe, there's a section there where I record the experiences that kept opening up and tearing me open and showing me the entire universe, the entire species pulsing in and out of time space every 100 years or so, just the entire species pulsing and evolving together, all of our individual karmic agendas being woven skillfully, intelligently into a collective karmic agenda, and the collective karmic agenda be informing all of our individual karmic agendas, so that it became impossible to separate the evolution of the individual and the evolution of the collective. And that became one of the fundamental core themes of my second book, Dark Night, Early Dawn, where I'm talking about the dark night, not of the individual soul, of the dark night that the mystic goes through before spiritual awakening, but the dark night of our collective soul. So that I began to understand from my sessions that all of our individual work serves not only our individual development, but it also serves directly, immediately, our collective development. And there are no such things as personal problems which are not also collective problems. Try and think of one. Think of any personal issue that we may be dealing with, and try to find one that isn't echoed or reflective of a collective issue in our culture. So I'll just pause there, hand it back to you, Duane.
Well, Chris, Chris held up a book or two. I can't let that just pass without holding up one of my own. And it relates very directly to what Chris is speaking about right now. that a reincarnational perspective. How can that happen? Well, here's a book that I worked on for 30 years, The Living Universe. The universe, according to modern science, and I've encountered this so many times, is considered non-living at the foundations, dead at the foundations. And as far as modern consumer society is concerned, it's all just dead matter and empty space. And people like Chris Bache come along and they say, wait a minute, no, I've explored the deeper reaches of the universe. It's a living system. In that living system, life can connect with itself. It can evolve with itself. And reincarnation then is not losing the thread of our existence as we move through multiple cycles of life in this larger aliveness. So we can, after a bit, maybe begin to explore the foundations of a living universe and that perspective. But I want to give Chris a chance to perhaps integrate that, connect the living universe with the evolution of life through that living system.
Well, in that context, I just want to sort of say something which is hard and consoling at the same time. And that is, from a reincarnational perspective, we're always popping into time-space, and we pop out of time-space into a spiritual meta-universe. We pop back into time-space, we pop out of time-space. And from this perspective, what is death? And all of the Enlightenment traditions, all of the, the awakening, spiritual awakening traditions basically say the same thing. Birth is not the beginning of our life. Look carefully, and you will find in your being, in your physical body and in your mind, the evidence of a range of experience that far predates your physical body. Death is not the end of our existence, because we now, and particularly if you study with people like Michael Newton and his work in Life Between Life and Past Life Therapy, we have an abundance of evidence that there is a continuity of consciousness that predates us and postdates our individual life. So when we talk about the deaths that are coming, I mean, we have to really relate to it at two levels. And both of them are fundamentally true, and to diminish either of them, I think, would diminish the truth of our situation. One of them is the death of a human being is a painful, horrendous, terrible experience. We are ending a life cycle. Every death is the ending of a precious cycle of life, and that hurts like hell. And in another perspective, we can also say that in a deeper perspective, no one dies. Cycles end, cycles begin, but the consciousness which is alive within that organism, within that being, is not extinguished, but simply paused. While we go home, we recalibrate, refresh, rejuvenate, and then we enter back into the fray. So this is, on the one hand, consoling, because it tells us that death is not the end. On the other hand, if you look at it really carefully, it means that this pattern of leaving our loved ones behind and coming back into new configurations and leaving and coming back into new configurations, this very difficult and demanding dynamic of constantly shredding, in some ways, the social fabric, the family fabric, our individual fabric, is part of the way that life works. We have to look deeply to understand. And when we look deeply, we begin to sort of see that the universe thinks in very different terms than we do. It thinks on a time frame much, much larger than we do. It just thinks on a scale, a completely higher order of scale. We have to learn to think like a mountain. We have to learn to think like the universe. We have to learn to really kind of think large and think deep and look at every human being we see as a precious soul who is a companion on this long journey, whatever our short-term relationship with them are. Underneath, we stand together in this long evolutionary trajectory, working for the collective good of our planet, of the entire human family. And if people don't have this commitment to the human family, if they have only a commitment to their own personal life or even their own personal family, understandable. But I feel sorry for them at a deeper level, because to be committed to something large is to activate and to acknowledge that in ourselves, which is large. And therefore, to be committed to your species, to be committed to your generation, to be committed to the planet, to be committed to the other forms of life that share this planet with us. These are an expression of a maturing soul. A young soul is small, right? A maturing soul is large. When we look at Gandhi, Martin Luther King, great souls which hold large swaths of humanity in their heart, those are the symptoms of a maturing soul. Right, Duane?
Well, so well said, Chris. That's a part of growing up. A maturing soul is to grow into the reality that we do have a soul and to keep the fire in the soul alive so that we can grow into this future that you're speaking about. And I've often wondered, why doesn't the larger world recognize what we're speaking about right here? This is the wisdom that's known through history and across cultures. Where is that wisdom today? And I'm reminded from the American Indian tradition of three miracles that's helped to reveal this. The first miracle is that anything exists at all. Anything exists at all. That's a miracle. The second miracle is that living things exist, like plants and animals. And the third miracle is that living things exist that know they exist and that have the capacity to explore the nature of that existence. Now, we tend to get so enamored with the third miracle that really elevates our capacities as a species, and we tend to then forget the first miracle, that anything is here at all. And one thing I appreciate about what Chris is doing with his life and his journey is not only speaking and learning about reincarnation and the individual soul and our movement through time, but also the nature of the universe that would carry that process, the first miracle. And one thing that we love to explore is the nature of the first miracle, that the universe is itself a living system. And we are beginning the evolutionary journey of learning how to live in that larger aliveness. Now, that's an extraordinary transition from living in a dead universe, and it's really dead matter, empty space. Well, what do we have here? Nothing more than our physical body, a bit of biological aliveness that's here for a short time. Well, what do we do with that if it's just short? Well, we consume as much as we can to get as much pleasure as we can for a short while before we're thrown into the mystery of non-existence. Chris is talking about a different journey. He's saying, wait a minute, we're alive, we're deeply alive. The universe is a living system. We're moving through that larger aliveness. And what we're trying to do here is move beyond the consumer society that's over-consuming the earth, move into a greater wisdom that says, look at who you are. Sure, you are a physical body, but beyond the physical body is the body of consciousness that lives in our living universe. And that's who you are more deeply, more profoundly. And by growing into that, whether we encounter that aliveness through the psychedelic journey, the meditative journey, and so on, that is who we are at a more foundational level. And that is what Chris is pointing to, and that is what I am working with as well with my own life.
Yeah, you're pointing to me, Duane, but come on, brother. You wrote the book, The Living Universe. You're the one who really, really spent all those years looking at the scientific evidence, trying to marshal the kind of evidence that would convince my atheistic philosophy department, where they just reject all of this out of hand because they're committed to a materialist perspective. And I'm presenting them evidence for reincarnation. They're saying, oh, that's nonsense because we know it all reduces to brain and we know where that comes from. And, you know, you're the one who took that on. And you just laid out and just hammered the evidence, and then also drawing upon cross-cultural testimony from multiple continents that are basically testifying that to the deeper mystery, to the deeper intelligence, which we can experience.
Yeah.
That's what my philosophical colleagues, you know, they're so skeptical about, ooh, experience. No. But come on, I say, let's get serious. A philosophical revolution begins with the question, what is it possible for a human being to experience? Right?
Yes.
They're telling me, you can't experience the things you say you're experiencing. And I'm telling them, bullshit. Come on. We have a method. We have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have used this method, have done LSD psychotherapy. We've pushed these boundaries. We have longitudinal studies that are showing us what happens when people do these things. You can't dismiss that and say, oh no, that couldn't be real because my metaphysical view says matter is the only reality, and you're talking about things that are not materially based, right?
Yes.
So, you know, you're knocking on their door hard, brother.
I want to bring in, let's look beyond philosophy. Because, golly, that's thinking a lot, Chris. Let's look at the direct experience. Now, the psychedelic experience is direct. It's immediate. You don't think about it. You're just overwhelmed with the direct experience and encounter with life in a different mode or different manner. And so let me share just in a briefly my experience in parapsychology. Almost half a century ago, the U.S. government began the very first research by the government into so-called psychic potentials. And to me, they're not, I don't like the word psychic. I like the word it's alive. And to what extent can we relate to and experience the aliveness of the living universe? And what does that reveal to us? And there were two things that came back after 3 years of involvement in in-depth research there at the engineering laboratory of the Stanford Research Institute. So I had the extraordinary opportunity, just extraordinary, for over a 3-year period, funded by NASA, the space agency, to begin to explore our intuitive capacities. And they wanted to know, they said, look, if there's an astronaut on the far side of the moon, is there any way to intuitively understand their situation? Can our intuition reach behind the far side of the moon and get valuable and meaningful information about their condition? Well, that was the premise that launched this 3 years of inquiry that after 3 years I dropped out because it was taken over by the CIA, because it was so compelling, the information coming back, that it was taken over by the Central Intelligence Agency, and it continued for another 20 years. So, but in the first 3 years, it was public information. And here's what was learned from that. First is that there are two aspects to our intuitive potentials. One, that we can receive information way beyond what we can reach through our normal perceptual capacities of the physical body. And then secondly, we can extend our energetic impact on the universe way beyond the close-in reach of our body as well. And so the receptive side was what is sometimes called remote viewing. And that was interesting. But the expressive side, which is sometimes called psychokinesis, of mind manifesting in matter, really took me into the realm of a living universe and exploring the ecology of the living universe and how we can do a dance with that universe and expands ourselves to the larger selves that we actually inhabit. And so we have a physical body, but that body is an anchor for an unbounded awareness, an unbounded consciousness that reaches out without bound into the larger universe and beyond. And so we are bounded for a short while, then, as Chris has mentioned, that boundary gives way. The body dies, but the consciousness that was carried along through the body does not. It migrates, it moves into the larger realms of the universe. And I don't presume to know where we're going with that, but I do presume to have unshakable confidence that we are learning to live in this larger aliveness, and that is the core journey that we're about right now as a species. And to the extent that we think what we're doing here is learning to consume more so we can be happy with the material things that we have, we're missing what this is all about. This is a place to learn about who we are beneath and behind and beyond the physical body, to recognize that we're a part of a journey of aliveness that, as Chris has said, has had infinitely deep origins and that has infinitely deep potentials moving into the further future.
Boy, do I want to jump on that hard. I want to look at this idea of, as we develop our potentials, as we make this turning point, as we kind of mature as a species, what kind of human being are we becoming? What are the potentials that we are activating? And I think it's far, far beyond what we are seeing even in the science fiction literature, which so much looks like cops and robbers in space, so far beyond the traditional pictures. But I want to hold that for a little bit, and I want to build up to that a little bit. And so I'd like to up the ante in a different way. I'd like to talk more directly about psychedelics. You ready to make that pivot?
Sure.
Okay. Now, this is something that both Duane and I share, and I suspect if we had a show of hands, we'd get a pretty high showing of people who have used psychedelics responsibly in this room as part of their own personal history, part of their spiritual practice history. Just as if we ask people how many people do yoga and have done meditation, we'd have the same type of thing. For our generation, psychedelics is part of the arsenal of not only spiritual healing the soul, but becoming more aware of what our lives are about and what life itself is about. So let me just speak personally for a minute. I was a brand new professor, fresh out of graduate school, read Stan Grof's work. Immediately, I felt like I saw my life vocation in front of me. I had to do this type of work. It had been made illegal. This was 1978, right? So it had been made illegal in 1970. I loved teaching. I didn't want to lose my job. So I basically developed a sideline to my career. I was a traditional in many ways, I hope not too traditional, but I was an academic. I was teaching courses at the university, sitting on committees, writing papers, doing all that stuff. But in my nighttime job, I began a systematic course of using a psychedelic protocol that I inherited from Stan Grof, totally internalized sessions, rigorous lying down, eye shades, earphones, sitter, all that stuff. You know the drill. Unwisely, I will admit now, I chose a protocol after 3 sessions of working with very high doses of LSD because I was in a hurry and I thought this would get me where I wanted to go faster. I thought it was about personal awakening, personal enlightenment. Yeah, come on. They'll be harder, but I'll burn off my karma faster. Let's get there. Let's put the pedal to the metal. Let's go. Well, turns out I was completely wrong on so many points. The goal was not personal enlightenment. And if you work with very, very high doses like I did, and you do it in a controlled burn situation, in a very carefully situation, when you start shattering the boundaries, within a few years, I was dealing with experiences where clearly what was driving my sessions and what was driving the purification and transformational process in my sessions was not my personal development. was not my personal healing or my personal transformation, but my work had gotten sucked into a larger historical drama of our collective development. And so much of the healing that took place in my sessions was not about healing Chris Bache or even Chris Bache's soul, but it was trying to engage and heal some aspect of the human family. And for years and years, this kept repeating itself, entering deep into pains which are stored within the collective unconscious, aggregates which are stored from all the wars, all the unhealed traumas of all the wars and all the abuse and all the droughts and all the men versus women violence and race versus race violence and so on and so forth. All of that trauma, which is not resolved at the end of any one lifetime, is accumulating in the human psyche. And for us to make this evolutionary pivot, we have to heal humanity. We have to heal the being, which for me is a single being, the human species as a single being in which we are all cells. And in order for this entire being to make the transition that Duane has talked about, from being an adolescent stage of the soul development into a mature adult stage of soul development, we have to heal. And healing is the first step to establish a new foundation, a new platform where we can then download deeper and more mature and richer energy and light and insight from the universe itself. It's like we're too dumb, we're too fragmented to be able to take advantage of all the wisdom and all the healing that's available to us. But as we heal this work, as we do this work, then we can take in more. We can take in more of the light of the universe. Now, I mentioned that just to kind of as a preface to where we go. When you start shattering the shells that hold our awareness in their fixed and narrow conformation, we can shatter a shell, and usually the first layers of shells, people talk about ego death, right? The death of our individual mind-body experience. Then you wake up into, you are reborn into a deeper level of consciousness. And if you push those boundaries, if you work steadily at those boundaries, eventually that process will do the same type of purification process. You'll hit limits and you'll go through yet another death and rebirth, but it's not ego death repeating itself. It's a deeper kind of dying. It's a dying that takes place at the species level. It brings you the rebirth that takes place, pitches you not into your soul level of individual awakening, but into some aspect of humanity's awakening. If you continue to push hard, at least it's been my experience, that if you continue this process diligently, and we'll talk about what that means maybe, but if you do this work systematically and you really take care of your body, and I don't recommend doing it the way I did it because it's a lot of wear and tear. If I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't do it the same way again. Please don't. I'd do it differently. I'd be gentler. But if you push like this, if you keep on pushing those boundaries, you begin to enter into a communion with the intelligence that's within the species, that's driving the species, and it begins to teach you. It teaches you what's happening. It teaches you where humanity is going. Now, at this point, I'll just inject one point, and I'm going to turn it over to Duane again. One of the things that began to happen about, 8-9 years into my work, I began to have a series of visions that just were being poured into me. And I think of Black Elk when I try to talk about this, because Black Elk, when he was 12 years old, he had this visionary experience of the fate of the Lakota people. And it shook him so deeply. You know, he almost died. He was out unconscious for days and days. And when he came back, he was holding this vision. He was so shaken, he didn't talk about it for years. In my case, I was downloading visions of what appeared to be the fate of the human species, but it wasn't given to me all at once. It was being dropped in pieces over a series of sessions stretched over years. But the fundamental teaching kept repeating itself and deepening itself. And the teaching was this: humanity is coming to a turning point. Humanity is entering a very challenging period, but a time of profound spiritual fruition. We were entering a time that would mark the beginning and end of history. It's a truly an epical shifting experience. We were coming into a time when we would literally begin to wake up collectively. And it wasn't about just individuals. This is a species-wide awakening. The dynamics are species-wide. The time of individual salvation is over. The time of collective salvation is at our doorstep right now. Over and over and over again, it was saying, this is a massive turning point. This is where we have been building to this transition for eons. It kept showing me a future that was just ecstatic, a future, if you can imagine, of our entire species being a species of Buddhas and Christs and prophets, totally awakened from the soul of our center. But in all of these 4 years, it never told me how we were going to get there. I had no insight given how we were going to make this transition, travel as far as we had to travel in as little time as all the research was telling us that we had. Because really, right, extinction is pressing down upon us and it's coming hard and fast. The crisis is moving in on us, right? Now, I share this with you because as I've talked about this, and it's in my book, and LSD in the Mind of the Universe, and as I've talked about this, I've had so many people come up to me and say, I've had the same kind of visions. That's been showing me the same thing in my deep meditation practice. We're coming to a turning point. This is a driving force. This is a social collective force. So there's nothing private. There's nothing personal about this experience. It's not my unique experience. I'm simply witnessing to something which many of us have been experiencing. Right? And I know that you've been experiencing that type of material, Duane.
Yeah.
Yes?
Indeed. Yeah.
So I'm turning it to you.
Well, let me summarize from my perspective what we've been speaking about. And 3 elements that come up of that summary. We're a world, a species that's not really recognizing what's going on here. First of all, we're not recognizing the nature of the universe in which we live. The universe is a living system. And current science says, no, it's just dead matter and empty space, and we're ready to work with the material dimensions of it all, and so on and so on. But the deeper aliveness is not recognized. Secondly, we don't recognize who we are. We think, well, okay, we're biological beings in this dead universe, and we're making the best of it in a consumer society. And no, we're not recognizing that we are part of that larger aliveness. And thirdly, we're not recognizing the evolutionary journey and its dimensions that we've been speaking about. We think, well, we die and the lights go out. That must be pretty much it. And no, we're going on and on and on, as Chris, you've been speaking about the reincarnational universe. We just go on evolving through it all. So really the transition that I see is, first of all, threefold. A new recognition of where we are. It's a living system. Secondly, a recognition of who we are as beings. We're a part of that larger aliveness. And thirdly, where we're going. It's way beyond consumerism and such. It's learning to live in that larger aliveness. What an extraordinary journey that we would be blessed with the gift of entering into that kind of journey. And you were bringing up the question, Chris, well, how in the world do we make the transition, the threefold transition, and understanding the universe freshly, who we are freshly, and where we're going? Well, a lot of attention is being put right now on material systems. Well, it's a climate crisis, so that means too much CO2 in the air, which means, well, we got to cut back on the cars that we drive and so on. It's a material response to a transmaterial challenge before us. And so again and again, people say, well, what are you going to do about it? And one of the key things I've been working on for decades is media. And why media? Media, isn't that the problem? We've got so much media, it's hypnotizing us into a materialistic mindset, and all we have to show for it is more consumerism. No, this goes way beyond that, because the mass media is the access to the mass mind. Here we are on a call with people in different parts of the world right now, and we're beginning to grow the neurological structures of the species as we use the mass media that we have right here to speak with one another and to grow a new understanding, a new consensus, a new consciousness of who we are as a species. So one of the critical elements, I feel, of a transforming future is to transform our uses of media. And this gathering now is an example, and there are so many more. We're exploding into a new opportunity to use the media to reflect, to use it to reflect on who are we, and then to communicate back. Well, I've seen that mirror and myself in that mirror, and I see a new possibility out there, and let's begin to evolve into that possibility. So we're on the cusp, we're on the brink, we're on the threshold of using the extraordinary media potentials that are out there right now. 2/3 of the people on this planet have one of these things, a cell phone. 2/3 of the people on the planet. All we have to do is pick up that cell phone, and we have access to a majority of people on this planet. By the end of this decade, it'll be 3/4 of the people on this planet have access to the collective mind through one of these. So we are over-endowed right now with the tools, the capacities to communicate with one another and to grow into a new collective consciousness of those three dimensions of transformation that we're just right on the threshold of pushing against, and the world's pushing back against us. And so it's a learning time for the species. It's an awakening time, a learning time, a growing time. And we're way over endowed with all the tools we need to go through that learning journey.
Yeah. This is one area where our work is complementary to the other, because you are a deeply committed, lifelong committed social activist, and you understand in ways that go beyond me, far beyond my understanding of how social transformation can take place. What are the roots that are holding us stuck? Where are the opportunities for facilitating deep social change at a collective level, at a practical, tangible, manifest level? My work has been much more internally focused. So let me speak to the inside of this process, because while my psychedelic experience has been deeply collective, it takes place in one room, in one house, on one street. So it's a very different way to access the collective. Let me tell you the next installment, or just point to the next installment in my own journey. Personal death rebirth, went through that. Collective death rebirth, went through that. Began to have these visionary experiences of where the human species was being taken, of this an extraordinary future, no explanation of how we were going to get there. Carried me then past that into a series of profound mystical experiences of non-duality and shunyata, emptiness, and sort of deep ecstatic joy. Then it took me into the diamond luminosity work, which occupied the last 5 years of my work. And in the middle of those diamond luminosity sessions, where I was expecting fully to be returned, because I was coming back into the diamond luminosity about once a year, but every 5 sessions, purify, 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 bam, diamond luminosity, purify, 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 boom, more diamond luminosity. And I was expecting about time to get back into the diamond luminosity, but that's not what happened in what was my 55th session in 1995, coming up on almost 24, 23 years ago. I went through a process where I dissolved completely into the species. I became, hard to imagine, but hard to describe. I became dissolved into the collective unconscious so deeply that my individual consciousness was basically just a slow remnant. And I entered into what I call deep time. I'd gone beyond linear time many times before. This dissolved me very, very deeply into deep time. So it was a transtemporal experience. So I had exploded the boundaries. It was transspatial experience. It was a transtemporal experience, and it took me into the future, deeper than I had been taken up to that time. And suddenly I began to experience systematically, methodically, clear as a bell, I began to experience the death and rebirth of the human family. It was like being able to experience a thunderstorm where you can see the patterns, you experience the patterns of the storm as a whole, and you experience all of the individual drops in the storm simultaneously. So it's a both and aggregate, but also collective. And I experienced the entire human family moving into a period of crisis. The ordinary structures of our world were being broken down and stripped away. We were losing control. We were being shattered. Civilization was being shattered. Lives were being torn apart. It was just extraordinarily painful. The whole human family was being shoved to the edge of apparent extinction. And this built and built for a long time in the session. And then just when it looked like that was it, this was it, we were coming to the end of it all, it was like a hurricane passing over an island. And the worst of the storm passed and things began to get lighter. They began to get lighter. People began to pick themselves up. We began to find each other after this. And many, many people had died, but many survived. And as we began to survive, we realized, we discovered that we had been changed. This crisis tapped us into something so deep, it drove us so deep into our being that it unlocked something in us. We shed things. We just literally, we had stripped from us all sorts of assumptions and accumulations. It tapped us into what I came over time to think of as the one heart, that all of our individual hearts are aspects of the one heart. When we began to find each other and meet each other, there was a creativity that was catalyzing new social forms, new forms of cultural creativity. And this created feedback loops where creativity fed new creativity. And there was an exponential growth in levels of awareness that were grounded in new values, new perceptions of the good, new understandings of human nature, new understandings of nature itself, new understandings of the divine. This is what I think of, what I came to see was this was a forecast, not a forecast, because I was in deep time, which means I experienced this transformation from the perspective in which it was already happening. And in the end, I experienced it as something that had already happened and something that was yet to happen. It was this not confusing, but the kind of both and experience that sometimes opens in very deep psychedelic experience. It took me about a year to recover from this one session. The way I put it in the book is when I walked around my town in Ohio and I saw all these beautiful beings, all these souls who did not consciously at an individual level know what they were coming into. But I knew that at a soul level, they knew what they were getting into. At a soul level, they had chosen to incarnate at this time in history. I just felt myself surrounded by courageous souls who were entering consciously into this very, very intense century of transformation. It was like walking around Hiroshima the week before the bomb dropped. Everyone around me I saw was entering into this terrible catalyst of pain, and yet they were deep and profound spiritual warriors. it took me a long time to learn how to live with that, to hold that. Uh, but I did. And eventually I brought it into Dark Night, Early Dawn, and then I brought it more fully into LSD and the Mind of the Universe. And that's a perspective that I know I share with you, Duane.
Yeah.
It's intensity. Yeah.
Yeah. As a longtime social activist and such, I want to bring another note into our conversation before we conclude, and that is there are no guarantees here. We've seen the possibilities. We've seen the potential. We've felt it in our souls and our bones and our being. We know that's possible, but there's no guarantee we're going to realize that as a species. As I look at the world, I see three great possibilities for our pathway ahead. One is what we've just been speaking about, extraordinary invitation into greater aliveness and possibility. But there are two other possibilities that are very, very real. One is the future of collapse and really the functional extinction of the species, not the complete extinction, but the functional extinction. We're no longer a force in evolution on the earth, nor are we connected well enough with one another to make a difference in our collective lives and build the kind of species body that you're speaking about, Chris, that we could end up just so fragmented and so diminished that we never have the opportunity to pull that species body together in its learning potentials. That's a second possibility. A third possibility, very real, we can see now, is the authoritarian future. We can see that in Russia. We can see it in China. We can see it beginning in India and other parts of the world. We can see it in the United States, for heaven's sakes. The authoritarian orientation is so strong. People are ready to surrender their freedoms. And what you're speaking about and what I'm speaking about is claim your freedom. Claim your freedom to be a living participant in a living universe. Grow into that freedom. Don't surrender it to the scientists that look at only a material universe. Don't surrender it to the media and the politicians that say, no, it's just about more and more material well-being for all people on the planet. There are three great paths before us. And the one that you've been speaking about and that I have as well is a narrow pathway, I feel, into the future. And we're going to have to do everything we can as a community, not just as individuals, but as you say, Chris, as a community, to elevate ourselves, to awaken ourselves, to grow into that future of evolutionary potential, to learn to live in that larger aliveness. So bless you, brother, and I thank you so much for your life of contribution and service in that that future.
Yeah, and you too, brother. Before as we transition soon into questions and answers, which is going to take us into a whole nother journey, right, with this here. I have the view, and I think Duane shares this view, that we have entered this century is a century of labor. We have been gestating the future human for millennia, for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. We've been gestating it through reincarnation over and over, deeper and deeper. But now we've come into labor. Gestation is long. Labor is short. Gestation can be gentle and take place while we can keep other things going on the surface. Labor is not like that, is it? Labor is intense. It requires complete interruption of life as we have ordinarily experienced it, and we turn deeply within, and we are in the process of giving birth to, collectively, what I'm calling the future human. Many people have seen this. They've felt it. They give it different names: Homo spiritualis, Homo noeticus, all sorts of different names. But the fundamental idea is that we are giving birth to a different kind of human being, a different level, a more evolved form of humanity. What might this future human look like? What is the substance of the future human? And here I go back to the theme of reincarnation. I go back to some of the experiences that I described in LSD and the Mind of the Universe. And there was, I've done past life therapy before when I wasn't doing the LSD work. And I've been familiarized with about a dozen of my former lives. Nothing special, no one special, just ordinary run-of-the-mill peasants for the most part. But I had a sense of that, But what happened in this particular session is that all my former lives began to come back into me. They all just started coming in very fast and furious. I'd already gone through a tremendous purification process and a death rebirth process, but then these lives started coming into me. It was like wrapping filaments of light around a kite spool. Each wrap was one life. And at a certain point, they hit critical mass. And when they hit critical mass, there was an explosion of energy. And I experienced this explosion of diamond light blow out my chest, catapulting me into a completely new state of consciousness. And all those individual lives fused into one, into a singularity. And then a teaching kept on unfolding and explaining what was going on. First the experiences, then the illuminating of the experience. But the basic vision that emerges is this. It's a different vision of reincarnation than we find in many of the Eastern cultures. The classical view of reincarnation is, okay, reincarnate, reincarnate, reincarnate. Get better and better, more compassionate, more intelligent, more this, more that, growing level by level by level. And when you achieve enlightenment, when you achieve a realization that you can understand and let your mind sink into the essence of its source, and you come to that shattering realization that the essence of your life is exactly the same as the essence of everybody else's life, and the essence of life itself.
Yeah.
Atman is Brahman.
Yes.
Our nature is our Buddha nature. When we reach that point, classic thinking is, okay, now we can leave. You've achieved enlightenment, you have achieved moksha, escape. You no longer have to be entrapped within ego, but you no longer have to be entrapped within time and space. You have permission to leave. Your work is done. But that's not what came forward in my sessions. What came forward in my session was the birth of the diamond soul, which was the phenomenon that we are reaching a point in human evolution where we have been working and integrating and getting rid of all of our negative karma, purifying ourselves, healing relationships, healing the scars which have been torn into our heart, healing the social scars, healing the civilizational scars. We're working and working that material. There comes a time when our entire history begins to coalesce, and the early stages of that coalescing often takes this form of healing, purifying, cleaning out the basement, so on and so forth. But there comes a point when that work is done and all of those lives congeal, and there is an explosion of consciousness where we no longer experience ourselves as a one generational time space 100-year-old being. We experience ourselves as a 100,000-year-old being. We experience ourselves as souls, and not a human being with a soul. We experience what a human being actually is. We experience ourselves as souls, and this is what I call the birth of the diamond soul. Because we often tend to use the word soul as the spiritual, non-embodied, the non-physical counterpart to our individual personality. That's not the soul I'm talking about. I'm talking about the consciousness that holds all of our former lives, all of them as one. And now what I think is happening is usually we experience that diamond soul only after we die. We go small to big when we die. Yeah. Come back to small, we grow some more, then we die. Yes, it feels so good to be big again. But what's happening, I think, if we keep that up, just keep it up long enough, sooner or later, the soul wakes up inside physical existence. And when that happens, heaven manifests on earth. When that happens, nirvana is samsara. When that happens, we realize we don't have to go anywhere to experience absolute bliss and sheer joy. The goal of evolution, of spiritual evolution, is not to spiritually mature and then leave. I understand where that view came from. I understand its historical context. It makes perfect sense within a context of 5,000 years ago, before we understood how old the universe was, how big it was, and how much intelligence had been sunk into building this universe. The goal of our spiritual evolution is to awaken, to truly awaken to our soul consciousness, which opens us into a different relationship with all other beings with whom we share this planet, and opens us into a different relationship to the intelligence that is manifesting time and space, continuously regenerating it. The goal is to awaken to that, to embody that in our physical being, not a disembodied transcendental awakening, but an embodied awakening. And then to bring that consciousness into the making of history, into the making of the planet, into the making of a civilization, a world which truly does work for all.
Hear, hear.
How far can we take this? What will it look like? It's not going to look like just what it looks like in the very beginning stages. What our spiritual traditions have told us over and over again is that mind creates our destiny. As the mind leads, destiny follows. We are creating our reality with our mind. When our mind is fragmented and conflicted, we live in a fragmented and conflicted reality. Now, we have to be careful. This is not simply an individual story. It's a collective story. There's a dynamic feedback between our individual manifestation, our collective manifestation. But basically, we are learning, I think, how to control the nuclear energy, which is the soul, the fiery energy, light energy, which is our essential divine energy, cosmic energy. We are learning how to be gods. And I don't mean that in any superficial sense. We are evolving into a being which truly not only will be at peace with ourselves and at harmony with each other, but a being which has capacity to manifest creativity inside time and space, the likes of which maybe today we only know in the mystical literature and the spiritual literature, what the Tibetans call the Mahasiddhas, the great beings around who have the capacity to work miracles. They have the capacity to manifest consciousness in ways that absolutely dazzle our mind and don't make any sense within a materialist scientific perspective, because they have gathered so much conscious power that they can manifest this in a way that bends the laws of physics, so to speak. I suspect what they're doing is manifesting a deeper set of laws of physics than are manifested at a lower energy level. This is high energy physics, yeah? So I think we're giving birth to the future human. We're maturing, we're growing into a mature adult. And if we ask, well, what does a mature adult look like? It's not simply a human being the way we are now with higher values and better values. It's truly an awakened human being, a soul-centered human being that lives at peace with themselves and at peace with each other. And now we pivot. And of course, this isn't the end of the story, right? Let's assume for the minute we make this transition. 1 century, 2 centuries, 3 centuries, we make this transition. The universe isn't stopping, right? We're going to be here for millions, billions of years, right? We have at least 4 billion years before the sun goes supernova. We got to be off the planet in about 2 billion years. That's a lot of time. This is just the beginning of a transition. We're just waking up. We're like children in the crib, created by the universe, waking up into this beautiful room. We're just waking up to what we are, who we are, activating our potential and moving on, moving forward. Now, I believe with Duane that he's right. There's no guarantees here. we have to, everybody show up. Everybody has to maximize everything they can do to possibly to make this, to get us through this, to bring us through this whole transition. I understand that and I accept that, and I think that's true. But I also would like to offer you a slightly different perspective. From within my psychedelic experience, and I don't know how to reconcile these two, but from within my psychedelic experience, I've been taken so deep into the future so many times. And in my last deep vision, the 70th session was my last of what I call the great visions, deep into the future. And from that deep future, I experienced this transformation as a given, as something that we had accomplished, not something that was an open-ended possibility, but something which we had truly accomplished. So from my own personal heart, I cannot doubt that we will make this transition. I worry deeply about what it's going to cost us. How many of our children will die? How many of our world's children will die of starvation? And we know what's coming in that way. That's what I'm worried about. And it's going to take every one of us at maximum exertion to really pull this off. And yet, we're not driving this, right? Human beings are not driving this. Nature is driving this. The creative intelligence of nature is driving this. We didn't give ourselves the big brain 100,000 years ago. We didn't give ourselves the evolutionary qualities that are embodied in ourselves, in our mind, and in our physical body. Some larger process is driving this process. The most we can do is cooperate with it, to recognize, to wake up, to see what's happening, cooperate with it, and to become a collaborator, a co-creator of this future human, which we will then, in our future incarnations, incarnate into. But I think the shift that we're seeing taking place, it's grinding its way forward, is a shift in the plate tectonics of the collective psyche. It's a shift at the very, very deep structure that after we make this shift, every human being born will be operating out of a different collective psyche, out of a different level of soul awareness. And that's the work of the hour. That's what we all knew we were getting into this when we were born. We chose to be part of this process. And with that knowledge, we can relax. Even while we go to work, we can relax in that deeper way of taking spiritual nurturance from the universe, even as we go to work and do our best. Yeah. So, brother, let's open it up and see what these good people, where they want to go. Yeah?
Thank you, brother. This has been a delight to share this hour with you. And I'm so deeply grateful, I just want to say, for our friendship over these decades. So bless you.
Yeah. Likewise, brother.
Yeah.
As said from this place, what an amazing deep words. It's not about the words, it's about the energy felt during your dance. It's transformative by itself. So I'm really honored by these words. And I have 1,000 questions, as I said, after your course, Chris. I gained 1,000 questions more, and now I got 2,000 questions. But concerning the time, I want to open up the microphone for the fellow wisdom keepers. People have questions, sharings, whatever comes up, wants to be shared. Now is the time and the place. And our questions as hosts will come maybe at the end. So if you have a question, if you have something to share, just open up your microphone and feel comfortable to go.
I see Todd has got his hand raised.
Well, it is lovely to see you both, and I would offer that your conjoined synergy is part of that love that gives us great optimism for the future. I'm a painfully optimistic sort because of having tasted that unconditional love and that complexity that's about. And so my optimism will be unchanged, though we do know there's a collective great NDE coming for the species, but the transformative power is wonderful. Just to offer some of the small kernels that I see changing is just the fact that we're talking about, psychedelics are not a panacea for every individual, but they are so quickly entering a wider conversation. And to me, that's going to be one of the essential tools to help change the consciousness individually, and then of course, collectively. Just as one tiny little nugget, I received email yesterday of a group and some of the folks I know that are deeply thoughtful and deeply committed toward a holistic understanding of existence. And they're putting together leadership schools with a psychedelic component to those, with a cohort goes through, thinks deeply about all the things that, a planetary, holistic, universal idea, but with the aid of having that transformative discovery within, and then going forth all together with a greater understanding. And to me, was unheard of just a few years ago, let alone a decade or two. And so for those, to me, are those moments of showing that there are so many folks working toward a greater understanding that will get here, even though there's going to be great pain before that's manifested on a wider scale. So anyway, thank you for your work, and I share your optimism, and it's unshakable, damn it.
And how could we not mention this great book by Duane, Choosing Earth? And there's a film that he and Colleen have created. There's a course which they have created. There are a number of initiatives, and Duane, I'll let you talk about this, but this is an extraordinarily powerful book. And one of the things I love about it, but he's given it away. It's like too important to try to make any money off it. He's been giving it away. And if you get it in the PDF form, all the references are hot linked. So you can right into one article after another, one research institute after another. It's all hot linked, and you can move right into it and go very deeply. Duane?
The one thing I would say, moderating my optimism, this book looks 60, 70 years into the future. And I've been doing futures research for a half century, truly. And this book is the accumulation of that half century of work. And I want to be optimistic, but boy, I tell you, it's fierce. The world is coming down on us now, not 10 years from now, but now. And we could run through the elements once again, but the reality is we're up against it now. And it requires our courage now. It requires our collective consciousness now. It requires a new media to reflect back to us new possibilities, new priorities, new perspectives on where we are, who we are, where we're going now. So to the extent that there are people watching and this program now, get on with your work, get on with your life, choose the freedom that you have, offer your creativity to our wounded world to move into this more transforming future. So thank you.
You bet.
Yeah.
I see a hand of Henrik. You can open up your mic, please.
Hey, thank you. So I came here as someone who's curious, and so I am going to ask a question at the risk of sounding flippant, because I obviously don't have the experience that the three of you have. But I'm just going to ask this question from a position of curiosity and trying to get some clarity. So I've heard a lot of things, reincarnation, karma, the path that the soul is taking, the path of humanity going forward, that we come from a source and intelligence. And it sounds like it's a very profound worldview, right? And I came from a Christian worldview. I'm no longer in that worldview. And my question is, what makes you guys so convinced this is actually reality, or this is actually true, and it's not just the LSD messing with your heads? Yeah. I told you it was going to be flippant, but you guys.
Absolutely. Good question, Arik. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll take a shot, Duane, then you take a shot. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Ken Ring, founder of Near Death Episode Studies, founder of the Journal of Near Death Studies, good friend, long friend. He asked the same question of me and asked it hard, pushed it hard. And we had a back and forth dialogue, and it was so rich that we decided we'd publish it. So if you were to go to medium.com, there's an article that you can track down by that. It's a dialogue between Ken and I, and the title is, "Are Deep Psychedelic Experiences Trustable?" How do we know that I'm just not picking up on the echoes of my personal mind, or I'm picking up
Right.
on the echoes of the collective psyche? What are there criteria that we can use to evaluate these experiences? And I just lay it out as clearly as I can. Ken punches at me, I respond. It's a good dialogue. It's a really important question. Are they trustable? Right? There's not a simple answer to that question. You really have to kind of take it and look at it deeply as you go through it, because it's not enough to say experientially they're trustable. There has to be more meat on those bones. It has to be more substances. And I think there is. I think we do have some empirical evidence that these experiences are verifiable and are trustworthy. Some of them, not all of them. But then there are other ones which begin to look at cross-disciplinary coherence that adds another layer of trustability. It's an important question. But what I would emphasize is that I would never say the things that I said today if I were speaking 30 years ago now. Because if you take a look at my scholarship, and I know Duane's scholarship, it's not just that we're sharing visionary experiences. We've done our homework. I don't offer reincarnation as a philosophical or theoretical perspective or based on an experiential perspective. I did my homework. I looked at all the available evidence for reincarnation. I looked deeply at Stan Groff's work and the available evidence in support of the hypotheses and the cosmology that he's presented in many of his books. So it's a combination of rigorous scholarship, which has lots of different aspects to it, and then carefully recorded, offered psychedelic experiences. And what we find, of course, is the cosmology that emerges in psychedelic work is essentially the same as the cosmology that emerges in other deep contemplative mystical traditions. It's not a new cosmology. It's simply a new way of accessing that same fundamental core worldview.
Yep.
Duane?
Yep. Let's see. That's a really important question. Really important. And I raised, the book, The Living Universe. I spent 30 years looking across cultures through different dimensions of science and so on to ask that question. Is there any agreement as we look around the world through different wisdom traditions that this is the nature of reality? Or am I just fantasizing that we're living in this living entity? Well, indeed, there's a very strong consensus and a surprisingly strong consensus. And if we had more time, I would love to get into that. So first of all, if we look at the world's wisdom traditions, there is a growing consensus about the nature of reality, human identity, and the evolutionary journey. Secondly, if you want other evidence, as I said, I spent 3 years in a laboratory setting with experiment after experiment, exploring the intuitive potentials of the human being. And those are the potentials that are required for us to reach into the larger universe and draw into ourselves the insights that Chris has so beautifully spoken of. And I assure you that the CIA would not continue, the intelligence agency would not continue this work for 20 years after they declared it secret. It went for another 20 years. Unless they were getting meaningful, validated scientific information about our expanded capacities as human beings. So we can go to different sources of validation and verification, but it's there. But we're just beginning to accumulate that evidence now, and that is now being presented to us, and whether through the psychedelic vehicle or through the meditation experiences and so on. But the evidence is there, and beautiful question though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And in addition to that article by Ken and I, that dialogue, you'll see a reference there, and you can find it at my website, chrisbache.com, and you can also see it in academia.edu, where I've put a lot of my major articles posted. You just look up Chris Bache there. And there's a section from the first chapter of Dark Night, Early Dawn, which really drills down on this question. And the section is called The Epistemic Value of Psychedelic Experience, right? The epistemological value. And I really lean on that and hard. So yeah, important question.
Yeah.
I appreciate your answers. Thank you very much.
I see a hand for Sue. Please open up your microphone.
Okay. I just want to say a huge thank you to both Chris and Duane, because I think they have the most enormous courage, and I feel encouraged to face whatever it is that may be coming our way, because they have the courage to go there in detail. Both Chris, I've read your book, so I know the detail of how much pain, collective human or other than human pain that you went through. And I just think, yeah, to have kept going with that, kept going, is absolutely amazing. So thank you. And for Duane to look into the future, to see really the terrifying prospects there, and still to, be encouraging us and going forward. So I just wanted to say, I wonder whether our collective consciousness has gone down rather than up, which with reincarnation, the idea is that you learn something and you come back. But I feel that the goddess cultures going back to prehistory had a lot of very high consciousness going on, the Minoan civilizations, etc. And I kind of feel that through our materialism, our consciousness has kind of gone down, become more limited. So I suppose I wonder whether the idea of reincarnation taking us forward, how that could fit to a kind of decline in consciousness and awareness of who we are in a living universe. Because I think there were cultures in previous times that had that. Sorry, I'm going a bit crazy on this thing on my screen. Stop. But so just I'd be interested what you thought about that.
Duane, you want to start on this one, and I'll follow.
I have a very simple response to that. We have just become a collective species civilization only in the last few decades, with the growth of the mass media in the post World War II era. We are becoming a collective entity, a collective being, if you will. That's not to diminish the wakefulness of earlier people and civilizations, but it's rather to recognize this is a new epoch, a new era, a new condition of the whole human family being pushed together by multiple crises. We went down the list: the climate crisis, the species extinction, all the rest. We are being compressed and squeezed as a species to awaken in a new way, though, and we did not have those pressures in earlier times at a planetary scale, and that's where we are now. So this is a very unique situation. It's not to diminish the past, but it's rather to awaken to the challenges of the future.
Okay.
I'd suggest a very simple analogy. You can look at it in the context of meditation, but also in the concept of physiology. If you fast for health, if you go through an extended fast, a safe fast, and you're doing so for health, what we find is that after a day or two, you begin to have all sorts of flu-like symptoms. You just feel miserable, you feel terrible, your nose is running and all this stuff. And then after several days, you move through that, and then you enter a period where you begin to feel better than you had when you started. Same thing happens in meditation. You meditate in order to feel better. So you quiet your mind, you get very still, you fast your mind. And what happens? Your unconscious begins to throw up all its garbage. I mean, it's just all the pains start coming up and all the emotions start coming up, and you think, what the hell? Why? This is getting worse, not better. But if you hold it, it eventually works its way through, and you begin to move into a deeper state, a sense of well-being. Understanding that reincarnation is happening not just individually, but it's happening collectively. One of the ways of understanding some of the rhythm of the epochs that we've moving into or have been moving into is that humanity has begun to detoxify itself. Literally, I think souls are taking into their incarnations, into their current incarnation, and it has been for some time, more karma than they might have in earlier generations and earlier centuries. They are literally stacking up more collective and individual karma to work on in their lifetime. And if you looked at this only from the outside, you would think that we are kind of devolving because we're dealing with more and more basic problems and more elemental problems. But again, from an evolutionary perspective, if we hold this, if we hold the perspective, like on meditation, like on fasting, we are clearing this past. Humanity is clearing its path, and it looks maybe like things are getting worse. But I think what it is we're getting down to business. We're getting down to some serious business, and we are healing that past. But the only way to heal that past is to confront it, is to let it into your awareness. We heal the past by expanding our consciousness and embracing the consciousness of it. And likewise, socially manifesting states of awareness in our culture, where we heal the racism, we heal the genderism, we heal the speciesism by holding that in our awareness and saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to rape our daughters anymore. We're not going to behave towards people of other cultures and other colors the way we've done in the past. We're going to move into a better world. So it is a complex picture, but I think from a deep enough perspective, it can begin to make more sense.
It does make sense.
I would like to add something as a holistic doctor as well, because from a biological perspective, as you see our brain developments during evolution, I think trauma has a major effect, especially the collective trauma, which made us during evolution less receptive for the collective view instead of seeing life as separate. And we're now waking up of these collective trauma and the healing, as you said. So I think there are several aspects which are very coming together on a biological, but also on the social, but on a spiritual level, which comes together, which give us deeper insights of these evolutionary swings during our last decades. So, thank you. David, I saw a hand of you. Please open up your microphone, David. You're not audible.
You are. Yeah. Okay now. Yeah. I want to thank you both so much. That was so moving. And I want us to be moved tonight. I mean, out of this, I want us to be taking some action. I'm 80 now. I know I'm in the final phase of my life. It might go on 20 years or whatever, whichever way you look at the mathematics, I'm in the final phase of my life. I don't have children, so I haven't passed on genes, but I've been thinking recently, it isn't only genes. At this moment, the important thing is passing on memes. I'm going back to Richard Dawkins' original formulation of that. He was looking for a social thing that was transferred. And it's the memes that we now pass on to future generations that are important. And one of those memes for me is unconditional love. I can't go through the story of how that's come up in my
my life. I did as a very mature student, I did my master's in consciousness and transpersonal psychology on the title of From Fear of the Other to Unconditional Love. I really looked into the nature of it. But how do we move? How do we move from here? We've got a prevailing ecosystem of memes, which are separation, and with separation comes you have to make up for this emptiness somehow. As you say, we are the one at our deepest level. So separation leads us to greed and all the things that are happening. And so that's a prevailing ecosystem. How do we change it? And sometimes if you have a prevailing ecosystem which dominates, there can be niches in that ecosystem where new cells can form. And I see like this is a cell here tonight, and I'm a consciousness only person. I think the nature of reality is consciousness. And I think we underplay the value of this Zoom meeting, for example. We think we're all in separate places. We are, but consciousness itself is non-local. There's no separation between our minds at this moment. If we were in the same room, your words, Chris and Duane, that they would be sounding the same in our heads, whatever the medium of transmission. So right now, we're not separate here. We're not separate now. We can communicate mind to mind. And sometimes species have different phases of their individual evolution. Like a fungus can have a phase as a spore, and then it can come to earth and then form. And I think there's a great possibility in doing, you were talking about this, of the medium like this, that we can form these cells of spores at the moment. So we're ready to come to earth, and we can begin to come to earth now. And I hope out of this meeting tonight, there'll be a few people. I want to be part of cells now, looking at how we can transform. I haven't had a psychedelic path. I took acid once 50 years ago. A new girlfriend introduced me to it, and it blew my mind. If I could have continued, if I could have got standardized doses and proper supervision, I definitely would have continued, but I probably wasn't ready for it at that time. But I know that the power it can have from that one experience. It changed a lot of things for me. So what I would like to do is maybe the conveners of this meeting could do it. I'll put my email address in. If anybody wants to form a cell tonight to take up some of the themes we've been talking about, I would love to be part of that cell, and I want it. I want us to move from tonight. So thank you both very much for such a stimulating and motivating talk.
Thank you, David. And how do we change? How do we move forward? And when I'm asked that question in public lectures, I say, read Duane Elgin's book, talk to Duane Elgin. So Duane, this one's yours.
Oh, thank you both. David, first thing I would say is that separation is now breaking down, and like it or not, we're being pushed into a sense of unity as a species, organism, and we need to step up to take care of the emergencies that surround us now. So first of all, the separation is true, and it has been really amplified by a consumerist, materialist mindset, but that mindset is breaking down. That is the mindset that's creating the crises that we're facing right now. Yeah. So the first thing that needs to happen is we withdraw legitimacy from that mindset, that worldview, that paradigm, and we are withdrawing legitimacy from that paradigm. If you look at the young people on the planet, surveys show, a recent global survey showed that 57% of young people feel we are doomed. Quote, we're doomed. That's what they were saying. 57%. Now, the politicians are certainly not saying that. The corporate people are not saying that. Typical academics are not saying that. Religious leaders traditionally are not saying that. but it is surfacing in the world nonetheless, because that is the reality. It's breaking, separation is breaking down. Legitimacy of the old institutions is declining. And so we have an opportunity to choose new pathways ahead, personally, institutionally, collectively. And so this is an extraordinary time in human history when we do have we have freedom. There's this interval of freedom that we have to make choices anew. And we didn't have that, like when I'm 80 as well, David. And so when I was young, boy, there wasn't the freedom to make those kind of choices, but there is now. And so this is an awakening time for the human family. It's a time to use the media and the computer systems and all the rest, create new memes for possibility. That's what Chris is doing. That's what I'm doing. And clearly, it seems what you're doing as well. Keep going. We're just getting started here. Keep going.
Let me add a footnote to that. When I was doing my psychedelic work, I never let my students know about it, never talked about it. I mean, I taught psychedelic research, I taught Stan Groff's work, but I never let them know that I was doing this work personally. Only a few people and a few friends in my department knew what I was doing. So I had these two separate sides of my life. I had a silo where I did my psychedelic work, and then I'd come to campus and I would be doing my ordinary teaching work. But what I found was that the deeper I went in my psychedelic work, the more the effects of that work began to spill over and show up in my classroom. That my students were being impacted by my psychedelic journey, even though they weren't being impacted, they weren't knowing about it. I wasn't talking about it. It wasn't a physical impact. There was a sort of a psychic impact. I began to find that there was a porosity where I was beginning to have access to aspects of their life where, in my personal experience, I was just answering a question. I was reaching into the fertile void of my imagination to answer a question that a student was being asked. But then they would come up and tell me that the answer that I had given was an actual reflecting actually what was happening in their life that week, this time. And this was rattled me so badly that I began to have to study what the hell's going on here. How can my personal work be producing these collective manifestations? And I worked on this for a long time, and eventually I wrote the book The Living Classroom, which is really not so much about teaching, it's about the dynamics of the collective psyche in groups. States of consciousness, there is no such thing as private realization. States of consciousness are inherently collective. An awakened state of consciousness naturally distributes out around us. It's like throwing a rock in a lake. The ripples just spread out. When a person begins to throw off the layers of distortion and pain and begins to enter into deeper and deeper states of clarity, the people around us are naturally, spontaneously, and inevitably are affected. Now, there are things that we can do to accelerate and intensify this contagion. We can meet online. We can dissolve distances of thousands of miles by bringing our minds together in this one space. And I believe psychically we energize the field of this mind, of this collective space. And if we did this once a week, every week for several years, we would begin to experience an even stronger field because it would be influenced by Rupert Sheldrake's work in morphogenetic field theory, not just by the energy of this particular group of people, but by all the people who had ever come together to study or to discuss this particular issue. And that's what I found in my classes too, that it wasn't just a matter of my mind sort of having a derivative or an impact on the present students, but the students, in coming together to study these things and to learn these things, were generating a field, and the field persisted after the students left. And it was reinforced and deepened by the field, by the students who came next semester, so that there was a learning that was taking place within the semester. And there was a learning that was taking place across semesters over years and years. So we have the psychic reality that where one of us goes, all of us go to a degree. But then we can reinforce that by using the technology that reinforces this collective sharing, right? And it doesn't have to be simply a psychic distribution. It can be a physical distribution and a physical creativity. Yeah. Yeah. Great question, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I see three questions. Also, a question in the chat box will serve for the end. And I want to say this because David, I want to reassure you, this movement will continue, and we as the Wisdom Keepers, we already started this trajectory of this movement. So everyone who subscribed for this Wisdom Keepers or the former Wisdom Keepers will be invited for our next Wisdom Keepers circle to keep this alive. And it doesn't matter where you want to share your future perspectives or your ideas or etc. You are more than invited in our next gathering. Our circle will be on the 18th of February. That's on a Saturday, to have space for everyone who wants to be involved, to continue with the journey and to learn, to grow into maturity. So great question, David. Thank you for addressing.
Okay, thanks. Are they regular meetings? How far apart are they?
So we want monthly because as youngsters, I feel I'm almost 50 and maybe a little bit younger, but we as youngsters, yeah. I do my psychedelic training, I do my psychedelic work, I'm a doctor, I have a retreat center and etc. So monthly basis, but there are a lot of groups where you can share in, but you're more than invited to join and to join together.
Yeah, I'll come. I'll also put my email address in the chat box. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I'll let the questions move on. Yeah.
Perfect. And I think that's an indirect question. Council of Elders, as we already discussed, Chris, during the LSD in the Mind of the Universe course, I think it's wise to invite them as well, just to open a space for Wisdom Keepers to add their wisdoms during the meeting, so we can learn and thrive together. So thank you for that. A question by Todd, please feel open.
Okay, I'll be brief since I already had my turn, but want to mention to Duane, first of all, thank you both again for everybody that shows up here for being part of this living classroom. But Duane, I had captive here, and I might have shared with you previously, my son is a college student and several of his friends for a recent, for spring break, and we used your book, Choosing Earth, and we had little assignments and play and deep conversation. But I would offer is that if we're not amongst those of that age group, we're not realizing to what degree the consciousness is already changing amongst those folks. I mean, it's palpably different, and the questions that they're asking are starting from a higher or deeper level of consciousness. You know, I'm not to in any way malign you two lovely 80-year-olds, but I'm a great fan of the actuarial tables. I mean, I think that's our continuing reincarnation blender. And so when you see these ones coming up that are having the questions that they're grappling with have already been answered in their mind that previous generations thought were not even questions, were valid. So anyway, I appreciate Choosing Earth, and there are a lot of good youth out there that are populating further and farther and forward. So thank you and good night.
Yes.
Thank you, Tom.
They're
Terry.
just amazing, aren't they? Aren't they just amazing? They are so much farther along, the young people are, than we were when we were their age. I mean, it's like when the going gets tough, God sends in the A-team. You know, they are just extraordinary in their capacities and their drive. Yeah. Terry, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I do. And no one's thanked the Wisdom Keepers yet. So thank you for putting this on. And thank you, Chris. I've been following you a bit over the years. And Duane, I had never heard of you until I read Choosing Earth. So huge gratitude for giving that to us for free. Really, really appreciate that. And my question has to do with the labor pains and the creative intelligence. Is it in the realm of possibility that things like COVID, like the climate crisis, that they're part of the labor pains to bring us into an awakening, an awareness, a connection, a worldwide union of spiritual souls,
Yes.
to know the truth and to move us forward into a miraculous future?
Yes. In a nutshell, absolutely, yes, indeed. The traumas of our time are catalysts for awakening. And so a trauma is not something to avoid, but rather to embrace, to learn from, and to rise above. And so we are being pushed by the traumas of our own creation. The species extinction, resource depletion, climate crisis, and so on. These are things we're creating, but now our creations are coming back to impact us and to push us into a larger sense of who we are as a species, a deeper sense of what is going on here and where we're going. So absolutely, this is a part of the labor pains of the birth of a species, civilization, and soul. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I agree completely. Yep, I really do. Yeah, I don't need to add anything. You got it. Yeah. It's all, what we're seeing going into this century, where we are now, decade by decade, things are going to be getting worse. It's going to be a deeper unraveling, a deeper falling apart. We can see some of the ways in which this is likely to manifest. It's going to manifest in ways that we can't anticipate quite yet, and it's going to hurt like hell. But as Duane said, these are problems of our own making. These are problems of our own making. So we're going to have to confront that in us, which has made these problems. And I want to remind you, who is confronting this crisis? Who's going to be going into this global systems crisis? Not human beings the way we ordinarily think of human beings. Souls will be going into this crisis. Each human being carries multiple incarnations woven into the fabric of their psyche and into their body. That means that each human being is carrying potentially thousands of years of experience going into this crisis. Some of those experiences are really negative and kind of, destructive, but many of those experiences are mature, wiser. And if the world is at odds with itself, our soul is also at odds with itself. We're having to come to terms with our own limitations. And the important point here is that what's happening on the world at large mirrors what's happening in the world intrapsychically. The world is trying to become one. It's trying to confront the limitations of its past behaviors. But we carry those behaviors, we carry those tendencies inside our psyches. So that as the world is struggling to become one, we are struggling to become coherent within ourselves and to become one soul. And I think there is a synergy there, so that the drivers of global systems crisis and global climate change and the various diseases that will be hitting us and so on and so forth, those are driving a global awakening, and simultaneously they're driving an internal awakening. So it's a both and situation.
Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you, Terry.
It's amazing how 2.5 hours already passed, and it feels like we're just beginning, and it's a beautiful thing. And I want to create 10 more minutes for a rounding part, as we say in psychedelics. It needs to be beautifully round. Before we go, I want to invite someone who didn't ask a question but feels somewhere deep inside itself, want to ask a question, to think about it, to have this opportunity to ask or to share something. I want also to give the opportunity to Mayo to ask a question from whatever sort it is. I go to the chat box now. because I saw there was a question coming in, and I have to see where it is. Sorry. So I can't find the question now.
I have a question while you look.
Okay, so please. So I can't find the question in the chat box now. If you have put the question in the chat box, please feel open to raise your hand and ask us the question lively. Mayo, please go ahead, and then Michelle, I saw your hand.
Hey, okay, Duane and Chris, I love you guys. There's nothing more to say, but I love you guys as much as I love everyone else. As David said, we are consciousness, and even though we are utilizing some of the systems, some of the actual technologies that perhaps might have brought us here in this time in our world faster than in the evolutionary history, we are connected, and this is what matters the most for me and hopefully for everyone else. My question for both Chris and Duane. Chris, you mentioned compassion, as well as Duane, you mentioned suffering, and in the other face of suffering, there's compassion. And with that, there is beyond personal compassion and beyond collective compassion. But what are the 3 practical steps that we can take today to gain this sense of compassion for Chris and Duane? What are 3 practical, or at least give us 1 practical application? In a sense, I'm looking forward to what does communication, how does that play a role in this sharing, in this understanding of compassion from our humanness, not from the individuality, but from the humanness that ties us all into this soul enriched life?
Yeah. Good question, huh, Duane?
Powerful.
He's asking us to put it on the line here.
Yeah.
Get real. Give us 3 specific things. You want to take the first one? Or...
Golly, I'm going to give one that I think he would be surprised with. So what the heck? I was going to be a doctor early on in life, as I mentioned at the outset. And I was thinking about being a vet or a doctor. And so one thing that I do when I look at the world and how we humans are creating it, I look at animal rescue videos. And I tell you, if you look at the creatures of the earth and different parts of the earth, and you go online and say, well, dog rescues or animal rescue, and the videos start coming up, and it just breaks the heart open. And the love for the well-being of all life, not just human life, all life, is just floods into your heart, your soul, your mind, your consciousness. If you look at the suffering of animals and say, well, it could be better. It doesn't have to be like that. Why do they have to suffer so much? Well, it pushes back against us. So number 1, I would say go online and just look at videos of animals and dogs and cats and so on, and how they're suffering. This goes beyond whether we eat meat or not. This has to do with life and how it's being lived by the rest of the creature on this earth that we share it with. So that would be one. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. I agree, Duane. The thing that came into my mind first was take some suffering out of the world. Look at our lives, take some suffering out of the world. Not only just between human beings, leading towards a gentler life and a clearer life, but towards other species. Look at how our life is impacting and causing suffering in the world and take it out. In spiritual practice, in Buddhist practice, for example, the first thing you do when you begin any meditation, any practice, is you cultivate bodhicitta, which is the cultivating the desire to save all sentient beings, which is you're doing this practice not for yourself. The last thing you do at the end of the practice is you do what's called the distribution of merit. You take all the merit that you've generated with the practice and you give it away. You give it away to all levels of the being, because this is an attempt to shatter the illusion of individual enlightenment. We do not do these practices for ourselves. It's not about personal transformation. It's about collective transformation. And in terms of taking suffering out of the world, Duane, how could you not mention your work, Voluntary Simplicity, the first book you wrote, right?
Yeah.
This is common sense for a world that's living over its means.
Yeah.
Voluntary simplicity, simpler. Simple, not in order to starve yourself or deny yourself,
Right.
but simpler in order to liberate yourself, in order to liberate yourself, to give yourself options that you don't have if you're committed to complexity, affluence, and so on and so forth. Right. So gentler, shared, and simpler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And with that, something that both of you created an important note on is using media as a tool. Yes, how can we utilize the media? David also spoke about circles. Besides watching videos of animals and also the suffering that we have as a world, what are some ways that media can impact? What can we build? How can we build these real connections with other human beings through these medias? Are there any projects that both of you are involved that maybe we can jump on or expand on that?
Wayne.
Well, great question. The Choosing Earth project, choosingearth.org, really is attempting to do this, build networks of care and compassion for the well-being of all life. That's explicit in the work that we're doing. It's not just for we humans, it's for all life. We all rise or fall together. And so let's build the relationships of awareness, of compassion, of love on behalf of the well-being of all life. And it's just exploding onto the earth right now. And there are just countless avenues for tapping into the creativity, the consciousness, and the care, the compassion. It's there. And we need to meet what the opportunity that's now available. And I'm thinking of young people as well at the same time, and how far along this path they are relative to we adults, we olders. And by the way, I don't think Chris is nowhere near 80. He's a kid on the block here.
No, I'm only 73.
73. He's got a long ways to go. So anyway, Chris.
In the broader, to sort of push beyond the sort of specific media question, I don't think to bring this revolution about, to bring this transformation about, it's going to take just all of the skills that we have, all the capacities we have. It's going to take doctors, it's going to take social activists, it's going to take educators, it's going to take politicians, it's going to take artists, it's going to take musicians. It's if we start making an itemized list of what we need to do, then we inevitably shrink to something that reflects our own personal strengths or our personal agenda. I think the issue is not figuring out what we can do. I don't think that's the hard part. The hard part is finding the courage within ourselves to do what we know we can do right here, right now. We are already standing on the spot where we have chosen to stand as our awareness, as we come into awareness. Do we have the courage to do what we know we can do without delay right now?
Right on.
And every one of us who is willing to do that, we're going to do different things because we have different aptitudes, different agendas, different karmic trajectories. We don't need to do what somebody else is doing. We just need to do what we have the capacity to do right here, right now, as deeply as we can. And in that lies, I think, a deep existential satisfaction. In that, we can come to the end of our life and know we did our part. Right. And that's what we want, isn't it? We want to know that we did our part as deeply as we could. Yeah.
Right.
Great question.
Well said.
Thank you so much, both of you, for existing and for showering us with your wisdom and all of your energy. We really appreciate who you are and what you are for all of us.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Michelle Adderby you had a question. And
Thank you, Bas. Just listening to the last two answers has just brought up more questions, so I'll hold those. My original question really projects far, far into the future and arises from some of my own visions that I've had through meditation. And at this point in this historical point, as we are at the ends of our experiment of separation and materialism, within that context, we're held within this very dense physical body. So, Chris, in your journeys, have you journeyed to the point or seen that place where there's no longer a need for this physical dense form, where we actually are consciousness in our etheric, emotional, causal bodies? We don't need a physical body anymore, but we are living this experience in this altered reality, I suppose. It wouldn't be this dense physical reality.
Yeah. You know, I don't question, but that is a potential that can be actualized and may be actualized over the long course of our evolutionary trajectory. But my focus has been different. And I think that we're coming out of a period of history about 5,000 years old where we have had a kind of a transcendent orientation. All the religions of the axial age of about the last 3,000 to 5,000 years, I think what happened was we began to have experiential access to the mother universe. We began to be able to go deep enough with our meditation, yoga, our psychedelics, began to tap into the mother universe. And when we did that, we experienced joy, bliss, ecstasy. Clearly, this is home. This is where we belong. This is where we want to be. And that leads to a story of the fall and then salvation, to get home. The whole project is to get home, to go back home. And that the ramifications of that are to value transcendence over immanence, so to value spirit over the physical body. I understand that, and that we have echoes of that. But I think now, in the 20th century, 21st century, now that science has pulled back the curtain and shown us how old the universe is and how big it is, we measure it in light years, 6 million miles in 1 light year, and we measure it in billions and billions of light years. So big, so old, and so filled with genius that it doesn't really have the same appeal to say the goal is to leave it behind. And so my work, and it's not my work, none of my sessions are my work. I just opened up and let the universe talk to me. And what it talks to me about is embodying spirituality, transforming the body, bringing it in deeper and deeper and deeper into the body, that literally it changes our biochemistry. It allows us not only to be healthier, but allows us to live longer. Sri Aurobindo thought it would take, his calculation was, it would take 300 years of continuous spiritual practice before we could begin to become biologically self-regenerating, and we could basically live forever in a human body. It doesn't need to break down, but we have to increase the energy within it. But first we have to extend the life expectancy to give us the 300 years to allow us to do that type of practice. His vision also is towards doing more and more and more spiritual stuff inside the beauty of the physical universe, to become co-creators with the physical universe. Now, whether there are some aspects of this whole thing which are purely transcendental, sure, why not? You know, how many physical universes are there? We don't know. We have reasons, we don't know. So we don't know how big the entire arena is that we can incarnate into. Yeah.
I'd like to reply to that as well. Wonderful question. Very interesting question. First of all, I would point out that our universe, even though it's 13.8 billion years old, in cosmic time, that's just an instant, a cosmic instant. And My guess is that in addition to, and not just, my guess is that in addition to our universe, we are embedded within the life force of a mother universe. So we're a daughter universe embedded in the spaciousness of a mother universe. The mother universe is completely unbounded in terms of dimensional constraints. Here we are living in the second, third, fourth dimension. And that means we're just a couple of steps above a black hole. We're just getting started here. 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, that's nothing in the scale and the depth of the mother universe. And so a body is very useful if you're going to be confined to 2, 3, 4 dimensions. Get a body for that. But if you're living in the context of the mother universe and the aliveness that goes vastly dimensionally beyond 2, 3, 4 dimensions into 200, 300, 400 dimensions, who knows what kind of vehicle is most appropriate, most fitting for that journey. So, but here we are, though. We're just getting started. We're early in the evolutionary game, I think. And so let's embrace the physicality that we have, knowing that deeper and further in the evolutionary journey is the transcendent possibility of hyperdimensionality and new forms of being and learning and loving and living. So.
Yeah. Great. Eve, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you both, my dears, friends. I would like to just build upon and add another thought to the question that was posed about, I think, what can we do now, whatever, the masculine 3 things. So I'll just respond from a numerical position here. And Chris, I loved what you said about each individual, because we're all, unique expressions of the great whole. Will do something unique and different, all necessary and all absolutely equal in importance. Absolutely. And so to that, I want to say that while we're thinking of media and ways of doing hyperconnectivity and broad scale connectivity, to understand that we are ourselves, right between our ears, is the greatest motherboard of all. And any thought we have, I'm not even talking about words now, but any thought we have when we talk about morphogenetic fields is broadcast to these reaches of the universe to which you were just referring, Duane. There's no end point on this stuff. Right. So if you want to start contributing as broadly and as powerfully as you can from this second on, become a great student of your own thoughts and learn to notice them and check in. Is this really what I want to be contributing, both to this being that's housed in this body in terms of my physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health, but also, is this what I want to project out to uplift all of humanity and beyond? And if it is great, keep doing more of it. If it's not course correct, do a tweak here or there, elevate just a tad, and know that in that moment, you're doing a great and massive and infinite contribution. And to just add another thought, all of our encounters, however random or unimportant, in quotes, they may seem to be. And again, we all go to the grocery store and we say thank you to the clerk if we're not scanning our own groceries. Just for a beat, hold that eye contact so that you know you've touched soul to soul. Right. And trust that that reverberates out infinitely, because that person, we were both nourished by that interaction. Both of us connected. We found, it's what Ubuntu, it's I see you and you see me, therefore we exist. So yes to all of the big, loud and broad things we can do, but never underestimate that we can do all of that in an instant from where we are with what is in us right now.
Yeah. Yes. Amen.
Well said. Thank you,
Yeah.
Eve.
Thanks,
Ellie.
guys.
What a beautiful contribution, Eve. Thank you so much. And it adds so much up to our first wisdom keeper we had in our wisdom keepers gathering, Jude Curvin.
Oh, yes.
Speaking about the hologram and the informational field, where we can add all our information, what we transmit, directly to this information field, and looking at the clerk and really sensing the souls. It's amazing information adding up to the mind of the universe. So thank you for that. And if you want to see the former wisdom keepers gatherings, in the chat box you find in the most upper part the YouTube channel. So if you want to look it back, feel free to do so. I feel we don't want to go home. We're already home, but we don't want to leave this setting. And that's a beautiful setting we created all together. I invite one more question, and then I have to be strict as a moderator. So if one feels very urgently want to ask a question or to share something, feel free to open up your microphone. It's on a random occasion.
Let me try something. May I make a little different suggestion, boss? I'd like to just take this opportunity to the end to thank the group, because I know that Duane and I have been carrying the weight of some of the discussion, but boy, what an extraordinary group this is.
Yes.
Each one of you have come into this moment in time with a long history, long series of development, and the minds and the bodies and the awareness which you brought to this conversation made it the conversation that it became. I have expressed such deep appreciation, not only to Basse and to Mayo, but to all of you for coming together, for holding these questions, for holding this driving force, which is taking us all forward. Thank you so very much.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Chris.
I would like everybody to put a heart up on their screen. Let's share a bit of love at the end.
I don't know how to do that.
Under reactions.
Under reaction, okay.
Or use your hands.
I can do that.
Okay, sending love from this space to all, and it's
Yes,
all felt
always.
as a community. Dear family, thank you for your contribution. The donation as a gift, as you all contributed as a community. Beautiful energy is coming to the Choosing Earth project. So send it tomorrow, and let's go on together as a family, and we see each other along. So thank you for joining, and love from this space. Thank you, Chris, Duane,
Love everybody.
for your work and for your wisdoms. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, love.
Oh, beautiful.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Namaste.
Thank you
Namaste.
so much, everyone.
Ciao, everybody. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Nice seeing you again, Bridget. David. Let's talk. It's a long time ago.